All right, we are back after a 1 week hiatus, which I'm very sorry about, everyone. I unfortunately have been very unwell the last few weeks, so we were trying to get ahead and have episodes pre-planned, pre-recorded, so if anything like this happened, we had some in the bank, but didn't quite work out that way, unfortunately, because I was sick for so many weeks in a row.
Yeah.
But we're back, and today we're going to talk about a very timely topic with the ending of Season B having just come up for a lot of my clients. We're going to talk about post-comp struggles for the people who are struggling with their food, their relationship with their body post-show. It's such a hard time. It's something that so many people struggle with. And so we really want to kind of delve into this topic and why it's different from post and normal dieting phase that an everyday person might be doing for a bit of weight loss, and like why it differs, why it's so hard, and also give you some strategies to work through that, because I myself have now done 5 seasons and 12 shows in total. So I've been through this post-show cycle 5 times now. So I know what to expect, and I have developed some really good strategies to navigate that. And I just want to share them with you guys and make sure that you guys have those tools in your toolkit to kind of get through this rough time.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, like, even if you're not a competitor, like, I think this episode will still be useful because, like, I've never done comps or anything like that. I think we're going to cover off a lot of, you know, like the Gen Pop dieting and how it's like different as well. But also maybe for those who are curious about like competing and maybe things that they need to be aware of like before they make that decision. But also just like, I guess, people on the outside of that world, questions that we might have, I'll speak for everyone, like looking in. So I think like, yeah, just to kind of highlight that even if you're not doing comps, I think you'll still get like a lot out of today.
Yeah, 100%. There'll be takeaways for everyone, because post any sort of dieting phase where you've been in a period of restriction, there are struggles. So it's going to be relevant to everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're excited to chat about that. But first up, I haven't seen you, Loz, in about 3 weeks, because last time we recorded was when I started getting sick. Like, I was not really that well that morning.
Yeah.
So how have you been? What's been happening? And what have you been struggling with over the last few weeks?
Yeah, so we do want to keep doing our powering through topic, I guess you would call it. What I've been doing, working, but things have been really, really good in that world. So like, my corporate job has been going really well. I'm driving some really cool initiatives there. Training's been going great as well. Like, I've started with a new coach, and we're doing more of like a athlete kind of vibe. So I'm doing some like athletic stuff, runs, jumps, that kind of thing, but then also lifting, and also dropping back to 4 days a week. So it's nice just having someone kind of like guide me in that area now too. He says like, we just redefine what 100% is, because I'm like, I'm always going to go at 100%. Just give me a different kind of target so I don't like kill myself in the process. I think like the thing that I've been struggling with, I was just thinking about it before, being like, oh no, I think everything's pretty good. But because I'm trying to do so many different things, I have noticed that I can struggle with focus, because when I'm doing one thing, I'm often thinking about something else. And I keep catching myself being very not present in the moment. Not necessarily like with other people. Like I feel like if I'm with someone, like right now, I'm not struggling with that. But say in the car or something, I keep having those trips where I'm like, wow, I don't even remember kind of driving or that kind of thing. Or I'll be at work thinking about, you know, like posting content later or something like that. So it is something that I'm mindful of, because it's not a productive way to be running my brain.
Yeah, it's so easy to get like that though, when you do have so many things to do, and like you do have, I guess, you know, your 9 to 5 job, but you've also got like your side hustle as well. It's just one of those never-ending things where like your brain just can't fully focus on one task, because it's like running through your to-do list in your head as well.
Yeah, it's really hard, because it's like I can't completely switch it off, because I do know that my ability to kind of think laterally, I guess, is the reason why I can't handle, you know, a bunch of things. But it's maybe just like turning it back 10, 20% and being like, okay, you know, if I'm sitting here doing this, I'm just doing this for the next, you know, hour or 2 hours or whatever, rather than like, okay, once I've done this, then I've got to do this after this, blah, blah, blah. Because then the initial task takes me like twice as long.
Yeah. I think something really helpful with that I found as well is like always have a notebook so that if you do think of something, if something pops up, just write it down so you can leave it out of your brain and come back to it later.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that with my phone. I have like a today list. That's like, like, oh, I've got to take this to the post office or whatever. Because it's like if you don't put it down, that will be like once an hour being like, hey, remember we've still got to do this.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm like, okay, I know it's on the list and I check the list kind of like intermittently. So I think I'm doing okay. Something else I'm trying to do in that regard is control my first thought of the day, which is something I get clients and stuff to do a lot too, which is just because I found that when I wake up, I'll often automatically go like, all right, what am I doing today? I've got to do this, I've got to do that, blah, blah, blah. Like, and it's a very chaotic way to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to catch myself doing that and then being like, nope, stop. Like, firstly, like stop the initial thought and then just replace it with like, I'm going to feel calm today. And just repeat that kind of like 10 times and then get up. And that's actually kind of helping, but it takes work.
That's so good. I need to implement that. I always refer to like my morning wake up as like my morning anxiety spike because I'm like, okay, let's go. We got to get shit done.
I know. And it's hard, right? Because you're probably like me in that you feel like, yeah, cool. I kind of spring out of bed, but it's probably stress.
I know. I'm like excited to get things done though. Like I want to get up and like start doing things. Yeah. So it's a nice way to be rather than being like, oh, I don't want to get up. I want to stay in bed. But yeah, it's probably like bit too much cortisol straight off the bat.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it because that's what it is. It's like I'm excited to do all of the things, which is great because, I've never related to the person who's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like every night is almost Christmas Eve for me because I'm like, I can't wait for tomorrow.
Same. I wish we didn't have to sleep and we could just like fast forward that part.
I have said this so many times being like, sleep is really getting in the way of like me doing all the things that I want to do. I reckon if I didn't get tired, did you ever read Twilight?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Years ago.
I'm getting off topic now, but like, you know how they didn't have to sleep?
Yeah.
I was always like, man, could get so much done.
It'd be so good.
Yeah. And they were all like geniuses because they got to like, they would just study like constantly. And I was like, oh, the vampire life, man.
Yes, but sleep is very important, guys. We will talk about that in another podcast. Anyway, let's move on.
How are you? How are the comps?
The comps were incredible. So I've just been in Melbourne the last 3 weekends in a row with comps. And then the weekend before that, I was in Perth for shows. So there's been a lot going on in terms of the bodybuilding shows, but had some epic results. Like everyone brought their best package ever to the stage that competed under Team BFit, and we got a couple of pro cards walked away with as well, which is always incredible to see the athletes do so well and surprise themselves as well with how well they managed to do in their first seasons of competing. So, that was incredible. Had a super fun time. I love being at the shows with my clients. Like, it's just as exciting as if I was competing myself, honestly. Like, I absolutely love it. But managing being sick through that was not so fun.
Because it must be like a lot of energy out.
It is. You have to be extremely switched on as a coach. Like backstage, I'm like checking in with my clients constantly throughout the whole peak week. So peak week is, for those who don't know, the week leading up to the show. You have to be so on top of the client's look every day. Like you're checking their photos multiple times a day. Yeah. So it's like a very intensive period of coaching. So obviously not feeling my best. It's rough when timing just doesn't align in terms of when you get sick and when you have to perform at a high level. But yeah, it just is what it is. I just had to show up for my clients and just kind of do my best on the day.
I think something I said to you as well, which I do want to highlight, is like when you and I were texting, like that this is the side of like running a business that's not being at the beach on a Monday.
Yeah, like you can't take sick leave.
You can't just be like, sorry guys, not feeling the best. I'll be back on Monday. Like you just had no choice. Like you had to keep going.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess the way that I coped with that and the way that I powered through that was I just had to pull back every other area of my life, which means I haven't seen any of my friends. Like literally all I did was work and sleep and just kind of get through and try and look after myself to the best of my ability, do what I know works in terms of recovering. The sickness just didn't go away because I was obviously doing so much and all the travel. It was just I didn't have the opportunity to fully rest, so I did end up having to take antibiotics, which I was very resistant to do. But the doctor told me I was going to end up in hospital if I didn't take them, so that threat managed to get me over the line. So yeah, ended up doing that, and I feel so much better now, which is good. But yeah, it's obviously been a challenging few weeks, but a fun few weeks at the same time.
Yeah. I also think those moments where you kind of like don't have a choice, they do build like your resilience muscle, because it's like, yeah, I'm not saying like push through all the time, but it's just nice knowing that like you can. Like you didn't fall in a heap, you got it done. Like I'm sure you felt like shit a lot, but
yeah,
you managed to kind of get through it. And it's nice knowing that you can. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I could never do that. It's like, yeah, well, you know that you've got probably like a few more levels.
Yeah, you can if you have to. However, I definitely recommend, like, if you are sick, just rest
Yeah,
if you can.
I'm not saying just work through sickness.
Yeah. Yeah, ideally rest if you can, but sometimes you just have to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what we did.
So on to the comp prep. What do you think is, I just wanted to start with like this question, like the difference between like the struggles that people go through during comp prep, because obviously like that's not a walk in the park, versus after the show? Like how do they differ?
Yeah, so during comp prep, obviously it's hard because you're pushing your body to a level of conditioning that is not healthy. Like your staged level of condition is not something you can maintain long term. It's not a general fat loss phase where you're aiming to maintain your results. It's for a very short period of time. It's an extreme look, and it's not healthy for the female body to be at that level of body fat. So when you're dieting down for a show, the struggles largely come from, I guess, how shit you feel being on low calories, having to perform, still do your training, still hit your cardio, still hit your steps when you're on low calories, and when your body fat is getting low. Because even if you're still on decent calories, like I'll still have some clients who don't go below like 1,700 calories. Like I've had clients on super high calories leading into the show. Even recently, I reverse dieted a few girls into the show, so they were on like 2,300 calories plus for the month leading into the show. Yeah, but they still don't feel good because they're so lean.
Yeah.
So
you get
it's cold.
Like,
And you struggle with being able to sleep as well. So our sleep is interrupted when we get to that kind of low level of body fat. Like, you get really cold, especially if you live in Melbourne. So there's so many struggles that people face. Also cravings, obviously. You know, a lot of people struggle with cravings in prep. Some people don't so much because you are so regimented in the foods you can eat. And something people will find is when they cut out sugars, you tend to not really crave them as much. But other people who maybe have a more emotional relationship with food will struggle with sticking to their food plan during a prep.
It might even be like if like people who are, say, living with other people. So it's like they've got other foods around, whereas I feel like if I was living alone, I probably wouldn't have as many cravings because it's like there's not the chips over there.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Correct.
Totally. So I guess they're some of the struggles that people would face during an actual prep, and managing fatigue, recovery, etc. But post-comp, it's like a whole different ball game. And I think people forget that post-comp is actually going to be the hardest part. Like everyone thinks, comp prep's going to be really hard, but they forget that post-comp is harder because that goal that you're working so hard towards, and that goal that I guess gave you the accountability to stick to what you were doing, it's gone now. Also, that goal provided you a sense of such a strong purpose because every movement you made every single day for the last 3 to 6, maybe even 12 months if you committed to like a really strong prep before the prep, like every movement and action you took was for the purpose of that goal to step on stage. And then that goal is gone. So people kind of lose their sense of purpose and feel a bit lost post-comp, which can be really hard. I think the other thing is, you know, people will go out for like a big fun meal post-comp, which is a completely fine thing to do. But after that, your body's going to hold fluid because you've just eaten a bunch of like gluten, dairy, sodium, things that you haven't been having in excess, and you're going to get bloated. You're going to hold inflammation most likely. And that in itself creates a struggle when you've been seeing your body get leaner over time for so many weeks and your entire goal has been to get leaner. And then all of a sudden, like, you're holding all this inflammation, you're feeling a bit fluidy, you've got this tan that's like coming off and it's real patchy, and that's not a good feeling either.
Yeah.
So there's that. You've just had a taste for sugar again and all these different foods again. And so your cravings are increased again, because at the end of the day, when you eat sugar, like, our bacteria in our gut feeds off sugar, right? So when you eat that again, it just intensifies your cravings for it. So it's really hard to kind of then go back to your normal whole food based diet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of some of the struggles both during and after prep.
Yeah. I think like, I know that comp prep is different to like normal dieting. I've never done like a full comp prep, but I have gotten down like pretty lean. I'd say maybe like 10%, I guess, like before stage. And something that I would say to if I was like dieting other clients when I was doing that kind of stuff as well, and also just like my own internal knowledge, is that when you haven't had those types of foods, or when you are in like a long-term restriction, like, your brain will make things taste better. I love all this stuff because I think it's so cool that, like, I look at it from the point of view of like, your body's just always trying to look after you, isn't it? So like, although it feels like these things are kind of annoying, you know, like adaptation, all of that, it's really just your body like trying to protect you.
Yeah.
So like, what will happen is that your brain will release kind of like more like reward signals of certain foods, because it's like, hey, you know, we are low on calories. I'm going to make this taste really good to make you eat more of it. And it's like, when people aren't aware of that, they can feel like out of control of their cravings and like, why do I want to eat this so bad? It's like, I remember at the end stages of like some dieting phases, and you're eating like a rice cracker and you're like, oh my God, this tastes amazing. Like, the rice cracker didn't get better. It's just that your brain is like, hey, eat more of that. So it becomes harder and harder to like elicit that self-control, because everything is working against you, because everything is trying to make you eat more, because we really are going against our survival mechanism when we are doing, you know, extreme stuff like comp preps or longer term dieting phases.
Yeah, and that leads into something that I really wanted to bring up in this podcast, which is, I suppose, the difference between like Gen Pop dieting versus comp prep dieting, and the physiological response that your body has post-comp to try and make you gain body fat. So I think that's the biggest difference between the two different types of dieting there, is that post-comp you're also dealing with, if you're at a level of body fat where it's unhealthy for you. A lot of women lose their period on comp prep, for example, which is a very obvious sign that you are below a healthy level of body fat, because our body shuts down menstruation when we don't have enough body fat to healthily produce a child. So that's one of the signs that you're below a healthy level of body fat for you.
Yeah.
So basically what your body does is it will increase your hunger signaling to a painful point.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, I need to survive. I need you to eat. I'm going to make you so hungry that you just have to eat until you've put on enough body fat to be healthy again. And it's like that thing where your body doesn't know if you're literally in the desert starving.
Yeah, it doesn't care.
Or if you if you implemented controlled starvation in a comp prep. Your body has no idea which one of those.
You can't send the signal that's like, hey, it's okay. Like, we've got Woolies down the road. Like, I'll go when I want.
Yeah, literally. You can't tell your body that, because it is physiological. And that's why so many women struggle with this insatiable hunger post-comp.
Because it feels like you eat and it's like, it feels like you didn't.
You're never satisfied.
Yeah.
Like, for context, my last show that I did in Japan, November last year, like, I was so lean in that show. Like, that's a level of conditioning I'd never hit before.
Did you do something different?
It was just IFBB, so it was just a different level of conditioning.
So that's just, you just done something trying to get to like a different kind of condition.
It was a different federation.
Right.
So, for example, ICN conditioning bikini versus IFBB conditioning bikini is very different. So, for IFBB bikini, you need to be super lean, whereas ICN wants like a healthier, fuller look. Okay. So, IFBB bikini is kind of equivalent conditioning for like an ICN fitness or sports model, basically.
Okay.
So, kind of hard to understand when you're not in the sport. But
Yeah,
it's
I
just
feel like it's a different
yeah.
language. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you just nod and
Yeah.
agree. And the people who know
Lots of
listening to this-
acronyms. I'm like, sure,
Yeah.
FBCN, got it.
Anyway, moral of the story is I was peeled and
I love that term.
yeah. Anyway, I have not experienced that level of insatiable hunger post-show before. Like, it was wild. Didn't matter. I went straight to like 2,500 calories post-show and I was still starving, even though I'd been on like 1,300 calories at the end of my prep and managing completely fine. But 2,500 calories, I was just insatiably hungry. And it didn't stop until I gained enough body fat that my body decided I was healthy again. So that's what people are going to really struggle with post-comp is that that's not actually going to shut off until you've gained a healthy level of body fat again. Maybe that will be when you get your period back. Maybe it won't because for some people it does take longer to get their period back. But at the end of the day, like that's what you're fighting against when you're trying to control your food choices and stick to your reverse diet. You're fighting against your body's instinct to survive, which is telling you, I need you to eat and I need you to eat a lot and I need you to do it right now.
Yeah. I think when I've come out of, and again, I'm not saying that it's the same as comp prep, but I do understand to a certain level. When I increased calories, I remember thinking like, fuck, I'm more hungry now than I was like when I was dieting. And it was getting more like as I was starting to eat more.
And it's a metabolic thing too.
Yeah.
So your metabolism will rev up when it's given more food.
It's a good sign, yeah.
It is a good sign. And in the context of like general fat loss for Gen Pop, that's a good thing because a lot of the time you probably want to sustain most of your fat loss if you just were dieting to like look better in a bikini and feel more confident, I should say, in a bikini. If you're just doing that and you want to sustain your results, then reverse dieting and having that hunger and metabolic increase is actually beneficial because that's how we build your calories up and sustain the fat loss. But it's not as beneficial post-comp, I guess, because it's really distorted.
Yeah.
It's like amplified so much because your body just wants you to gain fat like right now, this second.
I think as well, just knowing what to expect in anything really can help you. So it's like if someone is exiting out of a diet or a comp prep and they have no idea what to expect, or if someone like their coach hasn't said like, hey, you're going to be really hungry, like that's kind of normal, you know, like all of the things that you had just said. If you kind of have that expectation, like when it happens, you can like attribute a story to it where you're like, okay, I knew this was going to happen. You know, this is why it's happening. You're not just sitting there being like, fuck, I am starving. Like you might be thinking that as well. But I think it's really important just to lay out that expectation because then we do feel like we have somewhat like more control. And it's really the unexpected that fucks us up. Like, being like, oh, I didn't know. And the same for Gen Pop is like when they stop dieting and you're building them back up and they're starving, or their cravings are more or they're feeling like, oh my God, I just want to eat everything. If you tell them that that's going to happen, then when it does happen, it's like a side effect, right? It's like if you tell someone it's going to happen and then it happens, they don't freak out about it. But if you don't tell them and then it happens, they're like, wait, what's going on? Why do I feel like this? And they can like kind of freak out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely think knowledge is power and it helps to know. And I put a big emphasis on explaining that to my clients and obviously coaching them through that as well post-comp and, you know, explaining like this is normal. This is the scientific reason why this is happening to you. But it doesn't make it any less hard to get through even when you expect it. And that's kind of a conversation I've had with a few of my clients already post-comp where they're like, man, I didn't think I would struggle because I knew that this was going to happen and I didn't think I'd struggle. I thought I'd be okay. But if you're a first-time competitor, you're going to struggle. The only thing that I think improves the struggle is experience in the sport. And I don't know anyone who has come out of their first ever comp prep and just not had any issues whatsoever in terms of their relationship with food and insatiable hunger and sticking to their reverse diet. And that's something that I try and talk to my clients about as well. And I think everyone probably needs to hear is people say things like, oh, you need to nail your reverse diet to avoid doing any damage to your metabolism or gaining too much body fat or whatever. But you're not meant to nail your reverse diet. Like, you're literally meant to be incorporating more flexibility now. You need to do that. And yes, you want to be largely consistent, but I think it's really hard for people to kind of navigate that, like, where is enough consistency for my reverse diet while I'm still having enough flexibility now that I can actually be social and live my life again. So that's a really hard balance for people to strike, and there comes up, I guess, a lot of guilt and shame as well in that, because you haven't eaten out for so long and then all of a sudden you do it and you just feel guilty about it, because had you have done that in prep, you would have known that's like off plan, and it's just a really hard time for people to navigate. So much going on emotionally, physically.
I think as well, like when you look at, I guess, the type of person that competing attracts, it's normally the, you know, very disciplined. Where that discipline comes from is probably another story. Like, some people are maybe trying to prove something, another type is just lacks discipline. And so it's like when you put that person in a situation where it's now no longer like so tightly guardrailed, I think that's where they kind of, it's the type of person that we're dealing with, right? It's like that's where they struggle, because it's like, how do I know? It's like the student, how do I know if I've got an A, right? Like, what are the rules now? It's like your coach is saying, oh yeah, it's like around about 1800, like you can have a bit more flexibility. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they struggle because it's like, I don't know if I'm doing it correctly or not. Like, where's my kind of, there's more gray than there is black and white in compared to like the actual prep itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it doesn't always go to plan either, because people are always inviting you out for meals, etc., post-comp, and you don't want to be saying no because you've just said no for 20 plus weeks.
Like, please, friends.
Yeah, so you do need to nurture those friendships as well. I usually try and give my clients some guidelines in terms of, like, you know, like try and eat out this many times per week now post-comp, because they need to feel like that's okay. And sometimes just having their coach say like, hey, this is an okay thing to do really helps. But yeah, I think like the main message there is that no one is exempt from post-comp struggles. Like, everyone has been there. And I think people will see some competitors on Instagram who seem to be like nailing it post-comp and like doing a really good job, really in control of, I suppose, their body fat gain post-comp. But also, if you're a first-time competitor, try not to compare yourself to someone who's done 5 seasons, for example. Like, when I've spoken to clients post-comp, they're like, how come you're so good at post-comp, Bec? Like, why are you so good at reverse dieting? And I'm like, well, I've done it so many times. I wasn't good the first time. I stuffed up post my first comp too. Like, I ate way too much. I gained more body fat than I was comfortable with straight away. Like, that's how I have this experience to then actually talk to other people about it and coach other women through it, because I've been there. Like, I know it's hard. And every season it got better. So I think it's really important in this era of social media and where competing is really popular that first-time competitors are careful not to compare their post-comp to someone who is very experienced in the sport.
I guess on that, where we're saying, okay, like, no, you've never seen any first-time competitor exit, I don't want to say successfully, but, you know, without like some sort of big struggle or, you know, putting on too much body fat, whatever you define that as.
Or I just want to interject there, sorry.
No, go for it.
Or staying too lean because they're so terrified of body fat gain. That's also another struggle some people face.
Yeah, that like maybe they're saying that they're eating more, but like they're not kind of thing.
Or they're still doing excessive amounts of cardio like every day because they don't want to gain body fat and they're compensating for eating. And yeah, there's that as well.
Yeah. I think looking at that and how many things it can affect, I guess, like, what's your take on like competing as a whole? Like, who shouldn't be competing? Because it sounds like it does have, I mean, from my own personal experience, I was always like, I don't think I could handle it because I'm psychologically strong, but I just wouldn't put myself into that arena, I guess, because I don't think I would do very well with. I've always struggled with when I was like super lean, and we can get into like separating the comments and stuff. But getting those comments of like, oh my God, you look amazing, or like blah, blah, blah. And then when you aren't that lean anymore, trying to, separate that and be like, okay, that's not why people like me. Like there's other ways to get praise or things like that. But I just know that if I got down to like that level of lean and then got on stage and it was like, oh no, she's better or whatever, like that would really kind of screw me up. And I guess like competing is very popular now, right? Like you see it, and maybe we're looking at, what's the word? The concentrated group of people, because it's like, we probably follow a lot of fitness people, so it's not everyone. But it has an effect, right? Like it has like a really big effect on people, and like especially young competitors, like it can, 20, 21, if they're stepping on stage. Who do you think shouldn't be competing?
Yeah, I think this is such an important topic. And I'll start by saying, yes, competing is so popularized now to a degree that I wish there was some sort of regulation on who could compete, because I just think it looks all glitz and glamour on Instagram, and people forget that it is an extreme sport and you need to be extremely like mentally and psychologically strong to participate in this sport. And it's grown so much since I started. Like I literally started in 2015 and it was nothing like it is now. Like the numbers that they're getting in shows, especially in bikini, is wild. Like I would say it's quadrupled since I started. It's just gotten that big. And I think we really do need to consider like who is in a good place to compete and whether or not you are actually in a good place to compete before you start. However, it's also so hard because as a coach, like for me, I don't want to take on a client and put them through a prep if I don't think they're ready. But sometimes you get it wrong. And sometimes you think someone's ready, but they'll still really struggle post-comp. So I don't think we ever really know, but there's definitely some red flags as to if a person is not ready to compete. And one of the major ones, I guess, is if before you compete, if you are struggling with binge eating or your relationship with food and like being able to like eat the same thing every day and not feel restricted by that, like that's a massive red flag. Because if you're struggling with binging pre-comp prep, the number one trigger for binging is restriction. So if you then go into a period of 20 weeks of restriction where you have to nail your meal plan, I'm sure you'll get through it because, restriction is something that you've been doing your whole life. That's what causes binging. And then, this goal finishes and then all of a sudden you start binging again because you weren't actually in a good place to compete. Now, I'm not saying that if you do have some post-show binges, that means you weren't in a good place, because I think even people with good relationship with foods, do struggle with, like I said, the hunger is just so elevated. You do overeat sometimes. And there's a big difference between overeating and binging too. I was just about to say that. I feel like
the word binge gets thrown around a lot now. It's like we've all eaten too much like more than we should.
Yeah.
I'm not taking it, if you do struggle with that for sure, but it's like, sometimes you just overeat.
Yeah, and overeating is not the end of the world.
No,
I think
we're just humans.
Yeah, binging is something where I guess you just have absolutely no control. It tends to go along with like blackouts almost as well, where you kind of like forget what you've eaten. Like it's to that extent. So I guess that's one of the biggest things. Another thing would be if you don't already have like training and the regime of training and meal prepping regularly in place before you start a comp prep, then using a comp prep to try and build a routine is not a good way to do it. Like comp prep should be an elevation of what you already have in place. So you need to already kind of be living like an athlete in that you always meal prep, you always do your training, like no matter what. You're not like, oh, I was too busy, I didn't train. You don't find it hard to do those things because comp prep is an extreme sport, and I'll keep reiterating that because we don't want just everyday people who want to lose a bit of weight to do a bikini comp. Like, don't do that. Like, just do the weight loss journey. Like, that's all you need. You don't need to step on stage at the end. And everyone does it for different reasons, which is fine. Like, you don't need to, I guess, compete to win if that's not what it's about for you. But I still think that you need to make sure you're in a healthy place to do it. Another really important thing would be making sure you're eating enough calories before you start dieting. Because if you don't have a solid base, if your metabolism is not in a good place, you're going to end up dieting on really low calories and really high cardio. And the more extreme your prep is, the more you're going to struggle afterwards. Because, again, extreme restriction tends to lead to binging.
Yeah. Do you think that, so what age did you start competing?
I think I was about 24.
Yeah, okay. Did you find, because the line of thought, I guess, that I'm taking is I feel like it would have a really big impact on young girls especially, right? Because it's like they're very impressionable. They've probably got quite low self-confidence just from the result of, just coming out of high school and that kind of thing. Still finding out, like figuring out like who they are. Like I feel like it would be very difficult to then go straight into an arena where it's like you kind of picked apart and you're surrounded by just like that level of lean, right, as a young female. Do you think that people that young can do it, or girls that young, let's say?
Well, I do think they can do it, and there's a lot that do, and I've coached some girls that are between 20 and 23 to step on stage that competed this year as well. Who were incredible athletes with incredible athlete mindsets, to be honest. So I do think it kind of comes down to the person and also their experience. Like, were they a competitive athlete all through their youth?
Yeah,
because
that's true, I guess.
that puts them in a different position. But you make a really valid point that post-high school, like when do most women really struggle with disordered eating? High school, right? Like that's where we are, I guess, at our most vulnerable in terms of like our body image and our overall confidence. And it is where we tend to struggle the most.
We've also got no knowledge. We're like feeling shit and we're not sure how to not feel shit.
Yeah. And we tend to restrict a lot. And we do tend to develop disordered eating habits and restrictive behaviors or over-exercising type behaviors in that age group. And I do think there is a lot more risk for a younger competitor, for sure. And I almost think it's so interesting because now they have like a juniors category. So it's like under 23s. I think some feds even have like under 21s.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how I feel
like
about that.
they didn't have that when I first started competing. Like they had 30 plus, like they had some age categories to distinguish, I guess, like more mature bodies or people who've had kids. But now it's like the people under 23. And there are the rare people that are in a good place to compete at that age. But they're exceptions to the rule. Yeah. So I do think it's a little bit dangerous that we have people so young competing, and even like some girls so young starting PEDs at 20 years old. And just for people who aren't aware, PEDs means performance enhancing drugs, which is obviously allowed in some of the federations, not all of them. But like starting performance enhancing drugs at 20 when you are nowhere near maximizing your natural potential.
Yeah,
it's
you're not developed.
Yeah, and you aren't even in the right frame of mind to make that decision.
Yeah.
Like you're just looking for a quick fix like everyone is at that age.
Yeah.
So I do think there are some dangers in like being really young in the sport.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you recognize that as well. You must feel like a sense of like responsibility, I imagine, like as a coach in this area or in this industry, to really, because I know that there would be a lot of coaches out there who would probably take on anyone. If you're paying me, then I'll do it, right? Mm-hmm. But I know that you probably look at it from like I'll do it if I think it's the right thing for the person, because at the end of the day, you're not just coaching them to get on a stage, right? It's like you're coaching them. You become a very large part of their life, and especially like these young girls, they would be looking up to you as like a friend, a mentor, like, and put quite a bit of trust into you and your guidance. And if Bec says it's okay, then I feel safe in doing that. And so to know, I guess, even from your current clients or even future clients, to know that like a coach is going to look at it from that way and not just do whatever it takes, I guess, to win despite other risks or health concerns, I think is a comforting place to be in as a client, putting time and money and trust like into a coach.
Yeah, and that is really important to me. And there's a few things that I do to make sure that I'm looking after my clients as best as possible. And number one is I won't take anyone on like 16 weeks out from comp. Like they need to do a prep before the prep phase with me because I need to make sure they're on high calories. I need to make sure their metabolism's in a good place. I need to vet their mindset and go through their check-ins with them each week and see how do they actually handle stress? Like are they in a place where psychologically they're going to be able to handle a comp prep? And I have also had conversations with clients where I've had to say, look, I don't think going ahead with this prep is the right thing for you. And I have pulled clients out of preps, obviously in conversation with them and in conjunction with them making that decision. But if I think it's not going to be healthy and it's going to be too high risk for them, I will tell them because at the end of the day, like I don't want blood on my hands as a coach. Like I want the best for all my clients, and I do have like a really genuine care, like kind of like a motherly kind of feeling for my clients. And so, like, I hate seeing people struggle post-comp. Like, it's the hardest part to coach because, you know, they're so motivated and excited leading into the show. And then after, everyone struggles. So it's
common. Like, even you hear this with every sort of athlete, right? You know, the person who goes to the Olympics and is then like, what am I now? Like, it's an identity shift as well. Like, I don't even think it's limited to bodybuilding. It's just like any sort of... doesn't even have to be sport. It's like any time someone is working towards a big goal and then they achieve it, you hear pretty much 99% of them be like, yeah, I got kind of like depressed or like down straight afterwards. And I didn't expect that. I think you expect to get to like the top of the mountain and you're like, this is amazing. And you kind of get up there and you're like, oh, like it was kind of fun, but like what now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And that's like, that sense of strong purpose, I guess, that you have when you're working towards any sort of goal in any arena of your life, and then it's gone and you're just like, oh, like, what am I here for? Like, what is the purpose of my life?
Yeah. Especially is like, it's that like repeated thought pattern, right? Like you and I was speaking about at the start of the episode, like when you get up, you're used to having a certain kind of thought in the morning and you can reprogram it and it takes some time. But if you've been dedicating a large part of your life to this goal, this pursuit, you probably wake up every single morning being like, okay, so I'm going to go do my cardio and then I'm going to go to the gym and then I've got this, blah, blah, blah. It's like the day after the show, you have that thought as an automatic program. You're like, oh, wait, that's already done now. I don't know what today's going to look like.
Yeah. And you also, you tend to have no free time in a comp prep. So then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't actually have to do cardio 5 times a week now. So you have a lot of alone time with your thoughts, and that's when people struggle too, I think.
Yeah. The no free time, I think, is like, I can kind of like relate to that. There's a somewhat of a comfort to it. Like when every single second of your day is like kind of scheduled. Yeah, it feels kind of hectic, but it is... comfortable because you're like, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm doing this and this and this. It's like when you have almost like you introduce more choice into the situation and it can feel overwhelming because it's like, oh, now I can sit here and do this or I could go and do that. And it's like, it can feel like a lot when you haven't had that choice, you know, for the past 3-6 months or so.
And we tend to keep ourselves busy when we don't want to be alone with our thoughts.
Distraction.
Yeah. And it can be really confronting, like having alone time with your thoughts. And when that happens in the context of post-comp, when you're already having all these other struggles,
a dark place.
It's already a dark place. So, it can be really hard for so many reasons.
Well, you put up a question box. So I think to kind of like wrap up this episode, we'll go through like a couple of quick questions. The first one was, I found kind of interesting, was how to develop discipline. And I just wanted to like firstly talk about the question first because I think this person is asking it in like I don't have self-control in a post-comp. And I don't think that's discipline. Like because I think discipline is like getting yourself to do the things when you maybe don't feel like doing them.
Yeah.
I think what this person's talking about is like, I'm struggling to have, I feel like I'm no longer choosing like what I'm doing post-comp. I feel like this kind of stuff that we've spoken about. I don't think it's discipline. What do you think?
I think we should talk about discipline in a separate podcast.
Yeah.
And let's interpret this question, bunch it with all the other questions about how to break the cycle of binging. I feel like a lot of the questions were about binging, like how do you actually stop it? So Yeah, I think I wanted to talk about some of the strategies that I will implement post-show when I'm dealing with that insatiable hunger and how I kind of manage that and stay on top of things.
Yep.
Firstly, I think it is really important to be incorporating meals out. Like you've got to just try and not avoid eating out altogether. And start satisfying some of your cravings through that. Like go and have nice dinner with your friends, have something you want to have, even if it's pizza, like that's okay. Like you're allowed to start eating those foods again. And I think trying to deprive yourself of that completely is going to lead to more binging. So you're better off just having it in moderation to try and satisfy that craving. What I would also recommend is on a daily basis, start incorporating something you really look forward to that day. So whether it's, I don't know, if you missed Biscoff on your oats in the morning, or whether you missed being able to have like some sort of ice cream after dinner, like track that into your macros and make it part of your day so you don't get to the end of the day and be like, oh, I just really want like an ice cream after dinner. Like I miss being able to have that. Just track it in. Like at the end of the day, the main thing like post-comp is, I suppose, hitting your calorie goal. And even if your macros are a little bit off, at least you're then regulating your energy balance. So start incorporating foods like that on a daily basis to give you a little bit more variety. But another suggestion I would have is sometimes people go a little bit they get a bit too excited about their ability to now have variety post-comp and start working in all these different things at once in their first week. And firstly, your gut is probably not going to tolerate that very well, so you're not going to feel very good. But also, your hunger is still really elevated, like we were talking about before. So I would highly recommend sticking to a lot of the foods you were having on prep. Volume foods. Yeah. So your things like your Spud Light potato, your Kent pumpkin, putting zucchini or cauliflower in your oats, whatever little hacks you were doing on prep to try and stay fuller, keep doing that.
Yeah.
Until that insatiable hunger has passed, because at the end of the day, you're going to be hungry. And if you start having all these hyper palatable, really high calorie, low volume foods like chocolate, etc., you're just using up your calories so fast, and then you're going to be even hungrier. So work in little bits of those hyper palatable foods, but try and stick with the general like gist of what you're eating on comp prep.
Yeah, I think the palatability, which is just means like tastes good, is an important point, because that kind of comes back to what I was talking about before with like the reward signal. In like, if you introduce a bunch of like really nice tasting foods, firstly, it's like they already taste nice and they're designed to make you want to eat more of them. Like a packet of chips, they do research on how to make you eat the entire packet, like you're running uphill. If you put that in combination with like the restrictive, hyper like rewarding signals in your brain, it's like you've only got so much willpower. Like don't kind of put yourself in these situations where you're like, I should just be able to say no. It's like, well, you've got all of these things stacked against you. Like don't kind of put yourself in the situation where you've really got to pull on the willpower lever. It's like just keep, as you said, introduce a couple of them, but then just keep the rest as the same, because it's like then you don't have to resist as hard, and then you're not as prone to almost like letting yourself down, as people would put it.
Yeah, agree with that for sure. And don't buy like big servings of like something and leave it in the fridge or the freezer or whatever, because then you're probably just going to keep going back and picking at it. Try and get like smaller sizes, or even have some and then throw it out. Like
it just feeds into that self-shame, because it's like people go, oh, this is 6 servings, I'll just have one. No one is ever just having one. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not just having one. I'm probably sure you're not. Like no, like it's just not happening. So it's like, stop doing that. You are setting yourself up to feel disappointed, and then you being like, oh, I can't believe I didn't stop at one. Like no one's stopping at one. Like the packet of M&Ms that says it's 5 servings, I'm eating the whole thing. Yeah. Like you just are. Yeah. Second question is, how do you recommend to like go about regaining your period if you've lost it during a comp prep?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So if you've lost your period on comp prep, you've got to understand that it comes like from a few different places. So firstly, if your body's under a lot of stress, we can lose our period. Also, our period is a function of our body fat. So there is a point, everyone is different with this, but there is a point in your body fat where your period will switch off. Mm-hmm. So you have to gain back enough body fat that your body is comfortable to have a period. That is number one. So that's not going to happen in a week or 2 weeks. Like, it is going to take a few weeks to gain back enough body fat to start menstruating again. So that is number one. I also think it's really important to remember that reducing overall stress is going to help. So make sure you're not still overtraining, like scale back your training. Like, I usually tell my clients, like, don't full send it in the gym straight after comp. Like, your body is fragile. Like, take it as like a deload, couple of weeks, ease into it. Making sure you're cutting back cardio, steps, things like that. Like, you've got to be tapering off that stuff. I like to taper that back like pretty darn fast.
You just get time back when you're not doing fucking 15,000, 20,000 steps a day.
Yeah. Obviously, you need to get your calories up, which kind of works in line with putting body fat back on. But if I have a client who doesn't have a period and is very lean, I will put their calories up pretty high pretty quickly. 2,500 calories around about. Try and get them back to health, like, as number one priority. Like, I'm not going to slowly increase their calories when I just know that they just need to get healthy ASAP. Yeah. So putting them back up to like a maintenance level calories and then building from there straight away. Obviously, when it comes to periods, like, some people will just get it back. On average, most of my clients get their periods back within 6 weeks of comp if they lost it. But if you don't get it back within about 6 or so weeks post-comp, then I would definitely recommend getting some blood work done and looking at supplementation to support whatever is kind of lacking. So that's going to look a little bit different for everyone, but it's usually like a function of low estrogen or low hormones as a whole. Yep. Our hormones are getting depleted on prep. It is inevitable. So it's not really worth getting blood work done 2 weeks post-show because everything's going to be depleted. So you've got to wait a little bit of time and see if it will come back, and then if not, get some bloods done and start looking at some natural hormone boosting supplements, like things like zinc and things like that. We could do another big chat on that. But yeah, you can, depending on the person and what's going on, starting to really focus on what else we can do to support that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we will do another episode at some point in like the near future, because I know there's like a few things that we wanted to cover today, which I think we're probably just running out of time for.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of like the how to reverse and looking at the like psychological versus like the physiological symptoms.
Yeah.
So I think we will do another one on that.
And on period recovery for
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lucky we've got, infinite amount of future episodes that we can cover these. We're never going to be short of topics, are we? All right, we'll do a couple more questions. So one that came through was like, how do I tell my coach that I've been eating more, I guess, like, or off the plan that they gave me, like, without feeling like shame or guilt?
Yeah. Assuming this is post-comp.
Probably talk about it in general, I guess.
Yeah, in general too. Yeah. Okay. So in general, I think anytime your coach has given you a plan, whether you're in comp prep or you're not in comp prep, I think it's really important that you're honest with your coach. And part of this question was, are they going to be disappointed or angry at me? It's like, well, if they have a go at you for not following the plan, then they're probably not a very good coach, because it's just like, you can't have a go at a client for their struggles. Like, your goal as a coach is to support a client through whatever it is they're facing, right? So your coach will not be angry at you for following the plan. Your coach should be for not following the plan. Your coach should be giving you strategies to help make it easier for you to follow the plan. So if it is in a post-comp context, like, just be honest that you're struggling, and your coach can give you strategies to help you. Like, the more transparent you can be, the better.
Yeah. It's like, if you're paying a coach to lie to them, you may as well throw the money down the toilet.
Yeah.
Like, it makes no sense. But it's something that I was saying to you before, like, I see a lot in even the type of coaching that I do. Like, it doesn't even have to be a comp thing or a food thing. It's just like, oh, you know how I said I was going to handle that situation better? I didn't. It's like, okay, cool. Like, let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
But they do get into, like, clients, and I think I've even done it before, where you almost start wanting to impress, like, your coach or be like, look, I did well. Like, you want like a gold star kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's realizing as a client that, like, yes, your coach is invested in you, but it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference to their life whether or not you kind of do what you said you were going to do, or, ate off the plan or whatever. Like, it's their job to go, all right, well, what we're doing is not working. if it was one meal off plan, I'm sure they're just gonna be like, cool, it's fine, just let's keep going. But if you get to a point where you're like, okay, this isn't working, it then becomes a two-way conversation to be like, let's figure out why it's not working. Where are you hitting the barriers? Like, let's put in a new plan. Are you on board with the new plan? Not just like, I'm giving you a prescription and, you know, you're going to nod and say yes. Like, if I'm telling you to train 5 days a week and you're like, there's no way that's happening. It's like, just say so. Because it is a relationship. It's not like a hierarchy kind of thing. Yeah. But there is also a point where I guess for myself as a coach, if I tried, say, like 4 or 5 things, like strategies and things like that, I would have the conversation to be like, what's going on? Like, let's kind of either work this out together, or maybe this is different from like comp prep and stuff, but like maybe now's not the time for you to do this, because it's like you can only sort of give so many, like I can't do the work for you, I guess, is like, I've said that before.
Yeah. And like maybe if the client's just not in a good place to be dieting, whether they've got too many other things going on or something emotional that they're dealing with, like sometimes you just got to decide, okay, let's shift the focus from dieting.
Yeah.
And having that open conversation with your coach enables them to help guide you to what is the best decision for you. And it's the same as if a client says, I can train 5 times a week, and then they're like, oh no, I'm not getting this done, I'm only getting 3. Just tell your coach, like, I can't commit to the 5 times actually. Like, I know I said I could, but I realized I was wrong. Can we do 3? The coach should be like, yeah, 100%. I'll write you a 3-day split instead. Like,
because you're not like, oh my God, I was really hoping you were going to do 5. You're like, I don't care. Okay, we'll do 3 and we'll work it around. We'll, you know, change up the goals, the timelines. Like, it's
especially in customized coaching, which is obviously like what I do.
Yeah.
Like, it's customized.
Yeah.
It's customized to work with your lifestyle, not against you. So
yeah, I think the client has to ask, like, well, what's my goal here? Is my goal here to impress my coach, or is my goal here to like make progress?
Yeah.
Because you can only make progress through honesty.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to get fake ticks on the board.
Agree. There's one last question that we wanted to touch on, which was the one, if your coach gives you a meal plan after comp with no free meal, how can you feel like you're not in prep anymore? And this question, I feel like this might have even come from the same person as the last question. But what I would say to this is, if you have been given a meal plan after your comp, I think that in itself is a bit of a concern. If your coach is not moving you to a more macro-based approach post-comp, so you can have some flexibility, like, we aren't supposed to follow a meal plan every day of our life for the rest of our lives. Like, you need to have some flexibility post-comp. So if you've been given a meal plan and also no discussion of how to make that more flexible, then that is a pretty big concern, I would say. And I would be having a conversation with the coach and saying, hey, obviously I've finished my comp prep now. It's great having this structure. Some people love structure and meal plans, so I can understand some people ask for them even post-comp. But if there's no flexibility, like, ask them, hey, where does like having some dinners out with my friends fit into this meal plan? And if they can't give you an answer how to fit in some socializing post-comp, then I would consider whether that's a healthy long-term approach, because you can't live your life like that.
Yeah, I think the answer to a lot of questions across a lot of realms is just to say the thing. Like, it's in, oh, what do I do if my coach doesn't give me a flexible, you know, meal? Just ask them. Like, just be like, hey, I want to go out for dinner once a week. Can we make that happen? Like, I think we all always kind of like have these conversations with other people in our head where we don't invite them to the conversation. Like, we have it in our heads without them. And it's like, oh, they're going to tell me this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, just say that you want to meal out. Like, I'm going to say 9 out of 10 coaches, they're going to be like, yeah, that's cool. We'll do like, you know, which night out do you want? Like, and it would be that kind of more interactive relationship, which I think in terms of a coach client is the only way to do it. But also the most beneficial, where it's more of a relationship rather than like a director kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And like, as a coach, I would want a client to express any concerns.
Shows they're interested.
Yeah. But also it enables me to clear up any misunderstandings as well, because sometimes I do think it can just be a misunderstanding thing. Like, a coach could have written this meal plan and just kind of assumed that this person's going to eat out 3 times a week, like because they're post-show. And so it just comes down to communication. It's the same as if a client like starts a training program and they misinterpreted like how to perform it.
Yeah.
And so they're doing like way more than they're supposed to, for example. And they're like, oh my God, this is so much, but they don't ask the question.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is feeling like a lot. Like, let's talk
Speak up.
through like how exactly you're implementing this so that you can kind of figure that out and clear up any miscommunications, because it's kind of like another language for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience as well in this space. If someone's new to training and they're starting to read about like, I don't know, tempos and sets and reps, some people don't know what that even means. So
Yeah, a lot of people don't know what that means. And I think once you've been in the industry for a little while, you can forget that.
yeah,
But it's just that, like, to put anyone's mind at ease if you are a client, I think they often get scared to ask questions because they think that by asking questions, it comes across as like them being questioned. Like if my client asks me a question about something that I've given them a task or whatever, I'm not like, oh, how dare they? Like, who's
Yeah.
the expert here? Like, I actually see it as a beneficial thing because I've got a client who is interested and asking questions. Like, I love, one of my favorite questions is like, wait, why am I doing that? I'm like, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
I love talking about this stuff. But like the person who just goes, oh, I don't know about it, and then just like doesn't do it, no one's benefiting from that. Like the coach isn't benefiting from it, client isn't. Like I would just say ask the questions. Any coach who gets defensive has an ego problem and you need a different coach. And so that's a separate conversation. But I would just say just ask the questions. Like coaches, good coaches like being questioned because they've got an interested client and they also get to speak about the thing that they love doing.
yeah. And a good coach will have the answers for
Yeah,
you as
100%.
well.
Yeah, or be like, oh, I'll find out. I love saying, I'm not sure, I'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would
Yeah.
your takeaway be? What do you want people to take away from this?
I think my biggest takeaways would be, number one, like be honest with your coach. Number two, make sure you're in a good place to prep, like we were kind of talking about before, in terms of like what are some red flags to maybe not start a comp prep. And the number three that I would say is just re-listen to the strategies that I gave in terms of managing post-comp, in terms of eating the volume foods, like making sure you're working in meals out, making sure you're working in some foods that you really missed into your meal plan without making your entire like day of eating all these fun hyperpalatable foods. Like they're probably the best strategies that you can implement. But also just know that it's going to be hard and it's probably going to be hard for like 4-6 weeks, and then it gets better. Once you do regain a healthy level of body fat for you, then all that extreme hunger signaling switches off, and all of a sudden you just like wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm actually not ravenous anymore.
I've had a thought that's not about food.
It kind of just disappears and you just kind of forget that it was even there. But it does take time and it feels like it's never ending when you're in it. So just have faith that it does get easier, and you'll probably also love your off-season body with a little bit more curve on it once you kind of get to that point. Like you'll start to really appreciate like how you fill out your clothes better. And I know for me, like I don't feel my sexiest stage lean. Like I feel gross stage lean. And it took me a few comp seasons to get there. But now I much prefer my body like at least 6 kilos above my stage weight, if not more, like 6 to 10 kilos, honestly, because I just feel like I just love having those curves and that shape back and feeling healthy and energized and being able to perform my best and having libido again. And like there's so many positives to getting a healthy level of body fat back. So rest assured that better days are coming. And it's really normal to struggle, so don't beat yourself up over it if you are struggling post-show.
Love it. Really enjoyed that episode, considering I'm not a competitor.
Yeah.
That was actually super fun. So that's all, yeah? We're done?
Yeah. I think that was really good.
Yeah, cool. If you've got a friend or like another competitor as well who you think would benefit from this, or someone who's thinking about competing, please send them through, and also just let on Bec and I know if you loved it or if you have any further questions off the back of this.
Yeah, or any other topics that you'd love us to chat about on upcoming episodes.
Yep. We'll see you guys soon.
See ya.